they were like, we cannot have you housed in your father's house while you get this procedure, because you are going to be immobilized for several weeks alone in a house with a man that, not unstable, but uneasy. That's not going to be safe for you. So as soon as they saw that, they basically fast-tracked me into the Kaleidoscope housing program, which, as is for most of my transition, incredibly lucky. I was incredibly lucky. I was already on the wait list for that Kaleidoscope Youth Center program maybe 6 months prior, because I saw it, they introduced it to me in therapy, they said it might be a good option for me. But once they saw that I was getting top surgery and I would be physically immobilized, not able to run or fight back if I had to, they immediately moved me into that housing.
It's shocking, appalling, and frightening how many queer youth experience homelessness. According to the Williams Institute at UCLA, 17% of all queer people have experienced it, and this number rises as high as 28% when you're talking about queer youth. In this documentary, you're going to hear accounts from several activists. They've experienced this issue firsthand, and they're working right now to tackle the issue in Central Ohio. And you're also going to hear from a youth center that formerly had a housing program. Let's begin.
What we do know about LGBTQ plus homelessness nationally is that LGBTQ plus youth are 120% more likely to experience homelessness than cis heterosexual youth. And that there are, I want to say, about 40% of all youth experiencing homelessness identify as LGBTQ+. We work with a range of different human service providers in the area, like Huck House, Star House, and a lot of them are very, I would say, sensitive to the subject. They understand the crossover, that intersection of queer identity and homelessness, and how oftentimes experiencing that initial rejection from family can really put somebody's life into turmoil. And so we work very closely with them. Oftentimes they will actually reach out to us, ask for, advice and input, referrals, and, we do have social workers that work closely with those programs. So I would say that there's a lot of good resources here in Franklin County. I am less knowledgeable about the rest of the state, but I do know that there's a lack of that kind of stuff in other parts of the state.
My name is Rose Stabreit, pronouns he, him, and I am a transgender man living in the central Columbus area, have been my entire life. It really just amounts to people kind of talking around you, if that makes sense, or talking to someone that doesn't really exist. You see this a lot with evangelical Christians I talk to sometimes, and sometimes housing unit professionals. If they're not genderqueer, they talk to you. They don't talk to you, sorry. They hallucinate someone else in front of you that they think they're talking to. Like, in a more Christian perspective, some Christians, when they talk to me, even if they're well-meaning, they're like love-bombing me, hitting me with all this, I love you, I want to support you, they are hallucinating a young, troubled teenage girl in front of me and talking to her. And I'm standing behind her like, hey, you're not even talking to me, you're talking to someone else that doesn't exist. And I'm not getting any of the help and support because, again, you're not talking to me, you're hallucinating a conversation. When it comes to the other people in my housing unit, what I have heard is a lot of this talking around them. I've heard a lot of talk about housing unit professionals telling people what they need and not listening to what they're saying they need. Like, oh, you need this and this and this, and someone will be like, particularly like disabled people, other minorities, intersectionality will be like, hey, I actually need this kind of support. And they'll be like, no, we're gonna keep giving you this.
I toured Kaleidoscope Youth Center in Columbus, Ohio. They have everything from therapy to an after-school program kind of thing for youth to attend.
So who often comes in here?
So yeah, our youth that come into our drop-in center are ages 12 to 20. So typically it's LGBTQ plus youth. We do get a few folks that are outside of that population, but they're in the age range, and we don't say no to anybody. So yeah, we have folks come here to hang out, usually after school from 3:30 to 5, and then at 5 we typically have our programming for the evening. So we have different affinity groups. We have cooking clubs, we have D&D clubs. So, a lot of that stuff happens in this space as well as some other spaces that I can show you.
Okay,
so,
wonderful.
My name is Penelope. I use she, her pronouns. I am an organizer with a group called Trans Experimental Action. I have been a grassroots organizer for nearly 6 years, really focusing on issues of trans and queer youth quality of life. My first engagement with Kaleidoscope Youth Center was actually as a member of their community advisory board, which I think I joined in the fall of 2020, following the George Floyd uprising. I have been just a little bit critical of Kaleidoscope Youth Center, and so I'm going to try to be leveled and reasonable with how I treat them, because I do think that Kaleidoscope Youth Center is a very valuable institution that I want to see continue to stay in the city. Simultaneously, I felt like for years that my voice as a youth inside of their programming was being shut down in silence.
So it's important to have this conflict of interest disclosure. We'll be working with Penelope's organization to be hosting a screening of this very documentary. If you're interested in attending that, details will be on our Instagram. And another conflict of interest here is Penelope actually used to be my religious studies TA in one of my college classes. But with all that being said, I hope that none of that compromised the journalistic integrity of this piece. And if you think it did, I really want to hear from you in the comments below about how we could do better.
This is our corner of health materials. A lot of folks call it our condom corner, which, there are condoms. So yeah, a lot of health resources, pamphlets to community programs around the city and state. A lot of times youth will come in and do art. You can see there's just a few. Sometimes they'll come in and fill out this entire board, and it's, we get some nice art to look at for the week. And there's other community-related stuff on the board here. And some of these, unfortunately, do need to go down. Like, for example, House Bill 68 has already passed, unfortunately. So, that's one that could go down.
What is House Bill 68?
House Bill 68 is specifically the bill that banned gender-affirming care for minors. Okay. So we fought hard against that one.
The first time I had originally started going to KYC was when I had first started in junior year of high school. This was when we were just coming out of COVID, coming back into being in-person learning. And around that time, during quarantine, I had already attempted suicide for the first time. And I was very, very much in a dark place when I had first begun to know that I was transgender. That's why that's why I do this work to begin with, because for me, I would never want to have another person go through that. I want, when somebody finds out that they are of a different experience, of a different gender identity, to be with much more curiosity and encouragement, not something that feels so isolating, terrifying, stuck in these thought circles of what if, of what could be, of what could I have done, and on top of that, the shame that you feel when you know that people close around you who carry prejudices against somebody like yourself could have, especially those who are close to you and you are supposed to love.
These are not all of the schools, but these are many of the GSAs around the state that are registered with us. We are actually the hub for Ohio's GSA network. We work with the national org to coordinate curriculum, and we also do an annual summit, which is happening next month. And it's going to be in Findlay this year, which is new for us. So
interesting.
Yeah. We have video games. We've also got instruments, so folks can come in here, kind of hang out. We do Mario Kart parties often. So yeah, sometimes folks start making music, and that's always fun. In my opinion, it's a very comforting feeling. I'm sorry, I touched my microphone. And it just feels chill, honestly. It's like no expectations, you just come in and hang out. Oftentimes we'll have youth come in and do some research about topics that they may not feel super secure doing at home for whatever reason. And as long as it's like KYC friendly, appropriate in that regard, we're very happy to accommodate that. So, this is a great space to do that research, or if you have a project And actually, the keyboards are new and they're pretty fancy looking.
When I had came back from COVID, I had already known about KYC. At first, I had access to their Discord. Mm-hmm. That's when I had tried to get in touch with people who were. I wasn't aware about KYC's like entire drop center. I had only been aware about their Discord. I didn't know they had a drop-in center until I had spoken to one of the people who run that Discord at the time. And then I had went to their drop-in center in person. It was a completely different experience. I felt like I finally got to see color for the first time on the screen. It was so complete opposite of what I was going through at home, where I felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I wasn't supposed to exist as who I am there. Yeah. But here, and I could finally be who I know I was, who I know I truly am now. Mm-hmm. And it was so eye-opening. And I was able to learn so much about myself and others that it helped me pave the way of the future to where I am now. Mm-hmm. It helped me grow so much passion for my community because I can see so clearly that when we have each other and that we're able to find strength and courage and faith in one another, we can strive and become the most beautiful things.
I was like more COVID cautious, and I wanted to be in a spot where it was people were wearing masks. This is something that Kaleidoscope is able to provide for me, that sort of support system, and that other organizations could not provide for me.
And this is also an accessible space to do therapy. We do have upstairs therapy offices as well, where I think most therapy sessions happen. And if you come in here, this is actually our resource room, where we have stuff that folks are free to take. We have non-perishable foods, hygiene items, clothing, some coats, and yeah.
I still go there for therapy, you know, and I think that's like really important to me. I went there when I was like 19 and 20, and I could not find work to just like get myself a meal.
KYC's housing program started in 2019 and it ran through the end of last year. We actually still are working with about a handful of youth that we're working on getting transitioned into other accommodations. Mm-hmm. During that time, we housed over 50 youth, which I think some people feel like is not a huge number, but we are a small operation. You know, we've had historically between like 8 and 20 employees, so not a ton of folks. But 50, in my opinion, is actually really remarkable for what we were able to do. So at any time, we had between 5 and 10 youth in our housing program. We actually had a couple of different houses that we were renting from a member of the community that we were able to partner with. And then we're able to have our youth in those spaces. Around
the end of 2024, I was ramping up my efforts to get top surgery. Mm-hmm. I was getting the insurance lined up. My father actually threatened to kick me out of the house if I used his insurance to get the top surgery. Oh. So I had to double back and get my own insurance, get everything scheduled out. He moved the goalposts several times for what he was comfortable with, which happens with a lot of parents when their kids are starting to transition. As it gets closer and closer and more real, they get kind of more transphobic because they're scared of it actually happening. And then around the end of 2024, my dad was texting me some very concerning things about how he would be very angry at a surgeon if they performed surgery on me, saying some things that were borderline threatening, getting a little bit more aggressive in the house. I won't go into detail, but I told my therapist then at KYC, I was getting free therapy through Kaleidoscope Youth Center, told my therapist this, and they looked at the text messages and were like, oh, you're getting top surgery in about 3 weeks, January 29th, I believe it was, of this year. They were like, we cannot have you housed in your father's house while you get this procedure, because you are going to be immobilized for several weeks alone in a house with a man that not unstable, but uneasy. That's not going to be safe for you. So as soon as they saw that, they basically fast-tracked me into the Kaleidoscope housing program, which, as is for most of my transition, incredibly lucky. I was incredibly lucky. I was already on the wait list for that Kaleidoscope Youth Center program maybe 6 months prior, because I saw it, they introduced it to me in therapy, they said it might be a good option for me. But once they saw that I was getting top surgery and I would be physically immobilized, not able to run or fight back if I had to, they immediately moved me into that housing.
And an integral part of what Kaleidoscope really provided for the city was its housing program. You know, I've had many friends who have lost stable housing largely as a result of transphobic discrimination. We can talk more about specifically like the causes of why the trans youth housing crisis is the way it is. And Kaleidoscope was really like the only institution that was advisable at all for a queer young person to go to if they were in a housing crisis. Like, period. There's other organizations like Hug House and Star House that do exist that claim a certain type of the tolerance, acceptance, but it's not even comparable in terms of like how folks are actually being treated.
I got so much support from the community though. For the first 2 weeks, they couldn't get me actually in the housing right at my surgery date. So for the first 2 weeks, one of my friends housed me in her house and waited on me hand and foot, set alarms for like 2 a.m. to come inside, give me my medications. It was a beautiful display of affection and camaraderie from the community. And after those 2 weeks of the first recovery, then I was moved into KYC, and I lived there from around mid-February to about 2 months ago.
I moved here 2 years ago for Kaleidoscope Youth Center's program. I was previously living in Kentucky, then Cincinnati, in shelters and stuff. And then found this program, so I moved up here. One of my friends came because they live in Columbus as well, and so they went down to Cincinnati to get me and brought me up here. And this is where I've been for the past 2 years. My family just wasn't the best at like any time growing up, and I'd been kicked out off and on throughout my whole life. And this was just like the final like, you gotta get out, and so I did, and yeah.
Is that a thing that you've been hearing a lot from the other youth that were in the center?
It kind of depends. I feel like everyone has their own unique situation. A lot of them come from like abusive households, like I did, but not a lot of a lot of them left on their own, just to get away from that. And I feel like if I hadn't like been kicked out, I probably wouldn't have left.
The first couple months, I didn't really have to worry about a whole lot, and I could actually focus on finishing my college degree and getting my job situation set up. The most valuable asset I feel that KYC had was free case management, which is basically an adult that teaches you how to be an adult. If I had any questions about how to manage basic adult things at age 20 after basically getting kicked out of the house, softcore kicked out of the house, they would answer them. This was regards to insurance, finding my own lease if I needed to, saving money, managing money. Financial literacy in general was a big one. What other things did they help me with? They helped me with scheduling my hysterectomy and stuff like that. 2 surgeries in 1 year was fantastic. And they just provided an environment where they were constantly rooting for me and checking in with me regularly. Like, hey, what steps are you taking to do this or this? What steps are you taking to be independent? Now, I know that doesn't work for everybody because some people, due to disability or financial reasons, cannot be independent, quote unquote. That's kind of a farce that capitalism sells you. But for me, it really did help to have someone checking in on my little to-do lists and stuff like that. And my caseworker also made sure that I enjoyed my time there. I'm a very type A personality, get things done immediately on the dot. And my caseworker was encouraging me, like, hey, I know you have your college degree and your job prospects and you're leaving the state soon, but maybe you should just relax in this housing, because this is the first housing you've had not with your parents involved, not afraid to be transgender, where you can actually express yourself. You should take a month or two and just marinate in that a little bit, which was really kind of them.
I think I was treated pretty nicely. Well, it depends on the person, but like my case manager was really lovely. Some of the other staff have been good as well. Yeah, it was like one of the first times I felt like supported by adults in my life, so it was really cool.
Some experiences that I've had was when I was in the housing program. I was housed with somebody who was, in that time period, was going through a mental crisis. I was very close with this person. We were very close best friends, and unfortunately, a situation had occurred where they ended up going off their meds, and it led to a very deep spiral that created a very unsafe situation for me and some of my roommates. And it ended up ending with me being physically assaulted and then ended up being arrested.
Occasionally there were some disputes between folks in the housing program that were able to be resolved through mediation. Other than that, I don't know that there were a ton of like real challenges, other than it wasn't a fairly costly program that we were able to fund through those grants. But yeah, I think that it ran quite smoothly for the 6 years that we had it operational.
I did actually have a question about those conflicts, because I did interview several people who were in the program.
Yeah.
And they did tell me that a lot of these conflicts arose because of mental health crises.
Yeah.
And so
that sounds right.
How did Kaleidoscope address these issues, and how do you think that they could have done better?
Yeah, so like I said, we do have trained social workers that are licensed to do behavioral health as well on staff. So I know that when those conflicts arose, they worked directly with our social workers, and through that process, there was mediation between different parties that had conflicts. That's about as much as I know, to be honest. I'm not sure exactly the specifics of like specific disputes or anything.
Yeah, of course.
But I know that that was the process of working directly with the social worker on staff, and trying to mediate when possible.
One of the things that came up in my research is that mental health care is very hard for people to access when they are in these housing situations. It is this precarity that leads to people being unable to access important health care. Is there anything you can say about that?
Absolutely. I do believe that people who go through those type of crises in their lives deserve help and deserve exactly what they need to be able to combat so much of what they're probably already going through internally. When I look back on that situation, there were a lot of complexities, and even though what had happened, I still have the understanding that even though it ended that way, I know that that he wasn't who he was at that time. And I'm sure and I hope that he's in a much more better place mentally and safely, where he doesn't ever have to feel that level of what I assume to be isolation.
So yeah, we have our behavioral health program, and that, we have a couple of folks on staff that is specifically their jobs. They do therapy, and that is at no cost. We do not bill insurance, which apparently is pretty rare. And that actually allows us to get around some of the restrictions around diagnosing and note keeping. So we don't diagnose anybody, so that way we don't have to worry about going through insurance and stuff like that. If folks are curious what their diagnosis may be, I do believe that behavioral health clinicians will have those conversations with folks and give them that insight, but we're not putting that down in their files. And that's one way of protecting our youth, as well as not having to go through that rigorous insurance process. But we're still very cognizant of the ethical and guidelines for behavioral health. Other than that program, we also have done a number of kind of like special programs around behavioral health. Right now we're doing a crush course program, which is sex education specifically for that is centering queer experiences. We've done art therapy groups in the past. We've done therapy groups around various affinity identities. So that is, that's what's going on the wellness side. Here in the drop-in center, we do Wellness Wednesdays a couple times a month, and often those topics intersect with mental health. So we do focus a lot on mental well-being for sure.
And so what were some of the costs that went into like the day-to-day operations of the program?
Yeah. So just off the top of my head, we have social workers on staff who work directly with the youth in our program, and a lot of the work that they do with them is about job training, kind of like daily life skills, wraparound services in terms of other community resources that they may be able to access. So having full-time caseworkers in the program is really important. Of course, there's also the cost of the actual space that we were renting, which is probably the biggest cost. We also wanted to make sure that those spaces were furnished, as well as providing stipends for food expenses. So kind of just everything that goes into daily living expenses. And also programming that we worked on with the housing youth as well. We would do programs with them, specifically around like life skills and also like processing groups as well to talk about those experiences, because we know that experiencing homelessness is traumatic, and having that trauma, kind of manifesting in someone's system without addressing it is ultimately going to like be a huge challenge in life. So that's something that we really prioritize as well.
Because of our intersections of being trans and LGBT and queer and non-binary, there is more likelihood of there being discrimination when it comes to housing, when there is a lack of resource. I'm sure you've already known about the KYC co-housing being shut down.
Yes.
It will be shut down next year. Thankfully, it was supposed to be shut down this year in November, but due to the funding from the city, they will be able to continue to at least next April. And I'm at least hopeful that those who are living still within the KYC program are able to have places to be able to go to and be able to still find other resources to be able to help further their own lives.
And so with the impending closure of the housing program, how have the last few months been for you?
Stressful and chaotic. I originally was trying to get on disability because of my various disabilities. It makes it really hard for me to work. So having to go back to work has been a lot for me. And also just like I still don't have a plan for where I'm going after the program ends. So it's just been a lot. Why
did the Department of Health pull its funding?
Yeah, I think that it's hard to say for sure, because they, the reasons that they gave us may not be 100% their entire reason, especially, being a comms professional, I get that. Yeah. But what we were hearing is that there were just so many more applicants, and they wanted to diversify who they were awarding those grants to. I think a lot of it does have to do with our current environment, politically and socially. And I think that if we're looking specifically at the state, a lot of their initiatives and goals are not really aligned with what we're trying to do in terms of human services and populations that we're serving. And I think that we can see that play out a lot in the legislation, and unfortunately also in some of the state agencies as well.
I spoke to ODH as well, and they said that like they actually flat out deny that had anything to do with LGBT issues.
Yeah, and I mean, I can understand that point of view from them and that messaging, and I'm not going to argue about their specific intentions. I think we can just look at it within the context of what's been going on over the last several years.
Right.
And it's unfortunate that that decision was made, that like maybe we didn't need that funding as much as others, because I believe that the situation has played out to where our need for that specific program is really high. I don't think it's gone away, that it's decreased. If anything, the need for that housing program has only gone up in the last few years. I think there was a couple of different grants, one of them being through the state, one of them being through Franklin County. And then honestly, I don't know all the details of how things are funded, because there's some layering that goes on, and there's also grants that are like able to fund certain things, they have restrictions, and then others that are like more free. So it's kind of above my pay grade, but I do know that the major one was the Ohio Department of Health grant.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know why some of those smaller donors might have pulled out?
Again, I think a lot of the same messaging is, the need is so great and the applicant pool is so diverse that we wanted to try some of these others.
So you mentioned that you lived on the streets previously.
Yeah.
What was that experience like, if you don't mind me asking?
Stressful, dysregulating, scary, just not a great time.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I have a lot of dissociative issues, so like I don't fully remember a lot of it. I just remember like constantly being on edge and like never really like getting rest. Kaleidoscope said I'd be able to stay here until I was like 25. So that was like not my long-term plan, but my long-term plan was to get on disability and go through different avenues of finding housing. So like it kind of threw off my whole like long-term plans of getting on disability, going to like permanent supportive housing, for instance, or like finding my own place or finding a place with roommates, and having to do it all like super quickly rather than like spread out. So like I'm not really sure. Like right now I'm just trying to find like low income type housing, because that's what's currently best, even though that wasn't like what's actually best for me.
When we were first told of the news that the co-housing was being shut down, the whole entire like housing for KYC was being shut down, that one of my friends, Penny, had already left to go to upstate New York, and she had given me a call saying that she was going to come down to come see me, and we were going to try and like plan something out. At that time, I wasn't unsure of what we could do in that situation, but I was very much open-minded to being able to find some sort of solution. I didn't think that we would be able to raise enough money to be able to give it out to those who had been impacted so much by the loss of such a pillar for young LGBT youth. Because that's what it was. It was a pillar. Because a lot of times when you are at home and you're experiencing so much discrimination, isolation, all those things I had discussed, all those things I said, when you're experiencing all of those things, and then on top of that, you feel like you have nowhere else to go, you already know where it leads. You already know that when you feel like there's no way out, it just ends up becoming self-annihilation. That ends up becoming, unfortunately, the most plausible idea, because if you are in a space and feeling like, and that space is telling you that the whole world does not want you, cannot handle you, you cannot be yourself fully, why be at all? It's how you spiral so easily into those suicidal ideations, and that's what I went through. And to know that there's somebody else in my same predicament is why I wanted to join the LGBT Commission, because I wanted to shine a light on those, to let those know that you don't have to be stuck in that situation. You don't have to resort to the most unfortunate form forms of escapism to be able to instead embrace who you are fully and openly.
There are issues with transparency. There are serious issues with transparency with Kaleidoscope Youth Center and other institutions like it. Simultaneously, the primary issue isn't actually with transparency. The primary issue is with legibility. The type of literacy that is needed to run a nonprofit is different than the type of literacy that is needed to participate in youth-led, youth-organized, youth-centered politics that are being run by youth, such as what existed with QTAC, the Green Activist Collective, and COIL, Central Youth Liberation, and now, although it's more multi-generational, with Trans Experimental Action.
I feel like they have hidden a lot and are trying to be, I don't really know, because I'm not in the know of a lot of things, I don't know what things are being hidden and what things aren't, because I feel like there are a lot of things that aren't being spoken about to me, or I'll get it later than some of my friends who are in the program, and they'll tell me, and I'm like, well, why didn't anybody inform me of this? So I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it.
The activists also raise issues with how Kaleidoscope operates as an organization and how bureaucratic it can be.
I actually was one of the people in Trans Experimental Action that reached out kindly, probably a lot more kindly than I should have been, for the record, to KYC to be like, hey, let's collaborate. Let's have immediate interaction between KYC and Trans Experimental Action. That really, I don't think that ever really came to fruition. We were saying hey, if you need us to support you, if you need us to, we were asking, why isn't funding getting to the housing program? Yeah. And they'd be like, oh, it's tied up with the county commissioner and the city councilman. And we were like, okay, we as grassroots organizers, you can deploy us at those locations. We will go to these council meetings. We will go to these public events. We will go to the county commissioner and we will talk to them face to face. I was a lot more kind than I should have been in saying we can be the link between you and those communities. If you have to be bureaucratic and slow, we can be grassroots and fast. And they didn't really follow through on that collaboration, even when I probably shouldn't have even offered it, because at that point they were already shady enough to the point where we don't want to collaborate with these people as deeply as we thought we did. They were much more shady to, again, other people. But I think I just didn't see that until later, because I am probably one of the most privileged in the housing unit itself. I was surprised I was even let in.
When I was speaking to a lot of the people who used to be in the housing program, and when they were kind of lamenting its closure, they would talk a lot about how KYC is run as an organization. Would you say that, do you think that bureaucracy affects its ability to serve its community?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that unfortunately it does, because we are a registered 501c3 organization, so we do have to work within that framework. And of course that creates a framework that has limitations inherently. So most of the bureaucracy that we run into typically happens because we are a 501c3, and that status allows us to access grants from the state and counties, city grants that we may not have access to if we weren't a registered nonprofit. But I do definitely believe that there is a level of bureaucracy that then also has to go into that, unfortunately. And I also think that in terms of some of the behavioral health stuff, there's also processes that have to be followed there. Although I know less about how all of it works on that side.
What are the kind of limitations that you have to follow being a 501c3?
Yeah, so I think there's funding limitations. If we get specific grants, most times, they are very specific about how they want you to use that money, and so we have to use it very specifically, and we also have to report about how we're using those funds. So oftentimes there will be questions about why we're not doing certain things, and lots of the time, not always, but most of the time the answer is, well, our funds have to be used in very specific ways because of where they're coming from and the terms of those funds. So that is one area where I do believe bureaucracy really definitely affects it. In terms of actual specifics of the housing program, I know less about that, to be honest. About how the specifics, the paperwork, and kind of that process.
The word shady, that seems very interesting. What made you pick that word?
I'm a well-meaning person, and I'm
Yeah.
honest to a fault, and I want to trust people immediately when they tell me things.
Yeah.
Especially if it's an organization that is dedicating itself to queer youth. I don't want to look at them, look a gift horse in the mouth, and be like, I don't trust you, because I believe
Right.
there are allies everywhere.
What steps has KYC taken to make sure that it does efficiently use the funds that it has?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. So yeah, we were able to raise quite a bit of funds over the last 6 months since the housing program was announced. I believe it was actually in September, so less than 6 months. The community's response has been really amazing. We've gotten several large donations, and I know that there have been other efforts around the community as well to raise money, which is awesome. But we had, and I don't know all the specifics, but I know that we had a plan to sunset that program over the course of several months, and which is why we still have folks now that are working on transitioning into other housing programs or their own, sorry, I heard something, or their own leases. And so there was a very kind of like concerted, like meticulous effort to make sure all of the funds that we received were being, specifically for housing, were being put into housing. And there's also, I believe, a plan to provide each of the youth leaving our program a stipend, referrals to other services as well, life skills in terms of living independently or in groups. So all of those funds being placed into the housing program are definitely being used for that.
Nonprofits can also be too slow. Again, I was on that wait list for like 6 months before KYC opened, and the wait list was frozen for reasons that they could not explain to me. They said that they were editing the rules for the housing unit, and that's why they weren't letting anybody else in. And I know rules get edited because something goes wrong, but like 6 months to edit a rule set?
Yeah.
I feel like you could bang that out in one meeting. What's going on here? Why are things moving so slow?
I've spoken to a lot of people who are very disenchanted with just how nonprofits are, like, just work. Like what kind of the incentives are, how they are funded, how much they might rely on state institutions.
Right.
If you could reform the nonprofit system, how would you?
Yeah, and I absolutely agree that with that frustration, it's tough because when you are a registered 501c3 and you're doing human services, most orgs, I will say, most orgs receive the majority of their funding through grants, either city, state, county, or federal. And in those situations, you have to align at least somewhat with the mission of the state, the federal government, the city government, whatever it is, or that agency and what they're doing. And so obviously that will put you in a limiting situation where you have to contextualize the benefits and the purpose of your mission in the context of what they're ultimately doing or what they're privileging. And so, yeah, of course, that is limiting and frustrating, and I definitely share in that frustration. It's the system that we have that we're able to use that most effectively and most robustly serves our population, but it is very problematic in a lot of ways. And so I have so much deep respect for some of these grassroots orgs, mutual aid networks that are not necessarily registered as 501c3s, that are doing things at that local level without that kind of limitation. At the same time, I have to acknowledge that within the system we exist in, there are limitations to that, and it does kind of block off avenues for some of those grants. So I definitely share in that frustration, but I've also been able to witness how amazing those mutual aid networks can be.
As we were finishing this documentary, Kaleidoscope Youth Center announced they would no longer be expanding operations in Findlay. They also laid off 3 staff members.
So right now we have one person who is up in Findlay, and our dream there, our ambition is to have a physical drop-in space in Findlay. And specifically, we saw that there was really a lack of resources in that area of northwestern Ohio, kind of like the Findlay-Lima area. When you get into Toledo, there's a little bit more. But we worked closely with an organization in Findlay called Spectrum of Findlay, and they were like the LGBT center there, but due to funding cuts as well, they shut down their operations at the end of last year, and we actually worked with them to see what the population needed, what they were doing, try to pick up some of those best practices.
Seems like a lot going on there.
Yeah, I think, last year actually in September, we organized, I want to say in about 6 or 7 weeks, we put together a Pride Festival in Findlay.
And so while we're seeing this housing program ending, we're simultaneously seeing Kaleidoscope expand into operations in Findlay, Ohio, specifically because they are getting money from Marathon Petroleum Corporation.
So what led to the decision of investing this much in Findlay specifically, of all the places in Ohio?
So again, this is specifically what I've heard from our directors, and it is that we were looking at places around the state that really needed some kind of resource in terms of physical space, programming for LGBT youth, and that came to our attention as being a place that really was lacking in some of those services, especially with Spectrum of Findlay leaving.
That time can be invested into expanding into a community that the Kaleidoscope doesn't have roots in, because there's money there, rather than investing those resources in trying to maintain the programming that existed in Columbus.
Have any trade-offs had to be made to open up in Findlay?
So again, we're still waiting to see what we can do in terms of a physical space. So operationally, the costs have not been super high yet. But yeah, again, we're kind of just waiting to see what we can do with that with that space. I don't know that there's anything necessarily new that we're aiming to do that we're not necessarily already doing here, but there are some grants out there that are specifically around rural areas and rural populations, serving folks that live in less metropolitan areas like here in Columbus, because a lot of those young folks are just not able to access a lot of the things that we're able to access here in a city. So we're hopeful that some of those grant opportunities will pan out.
I currently run a little fight club event that happens every month where a bunch of trans dudes and other trans people get in a ring in a space and we box it out, and we use all the money to support unhoused trans people in the area. But we don't use a fundraising corporation or anything. We literally just use Chuffed. We take the money out in cash and we deliver it in cash, no questions asked. And I feel to fundraise for the community, that is the best strategy you can employ. It gets a little bit different with our bigger KYC fundraiser. We raised over $30,000, crazy. And with that kind of money for tax reasons, you do sometimes need to go through various organizations to disseminate it. But KYC has been acting shady in the sense that when it comes to their finances and when it comes to how they fund the housing unit program, they say that their hands are tied when they very well might not be. They say that, well, we just can't, we can't tell you why we made this decision. It's why not? From what I've heard through the grapevine, apparently they are opening new branches and offices. Was it in Findlay, Ohio?
That's what I heard.
Yeah, in Findlay, Ohio, but the housing unit is going down. So this allocation of resources, I'm not saying you can't make hard decisions. I'm saying you need to explain how those hard decisions were made and show me the roadmap of money as to why that decision was made. I'm going to be less torn up about it because I have the resources to support myself if a housing unit goes under. But a lot of my friends in the unit don't, due to lack, disability, various issues. They can't support themselves the way I can. So for them, the housing unit going down is kind of an end of the world, world-rocking scenario. And you're going to need to explain as a nonprofit that conversation to them directly without holding anything back. You do need to explain those decisions because you are messing with people's lives and housing. And if you say to someone who you are putting in a life or death scenario because you're shutting down the housing unit, we just can't tell you this because of this and this reason, that's not good enough.
You started a fundraiser.
I did.
Yes. Yes. Why do you have that reaction?
It's been a year.
It's been a year?
It's been quite a year for me. Yeah, no, the goal was, with the understanding that this program was ending, we wanted to get money directly into the hands of the youth impacted by the end of this housing program. And so really I created this chuff.org campaign with the idea that like I thought like maybe we would get like $1,500, right? I didn't have like super high hopes. I was like, okay, maybe this, and then really with the idea that like, okay, if we get $1,500, each person will get like $150, or at that time it wasn't clear to me how many people were in the program. I really decided to do this after first, like, it was brought to me as like this rumor basically that like, oh, it sounds like Kaleidoscope's program is gonna end. Like, and then I was like, well, what's going on? I have friends in that program. So I reached out to Taya. And Taya like was like, yeah, all of this is happening. This is what we've been told. We've been told as little as, I think it was 6 weeks.
Wow.
And obviously it's been extended a lot farther than that. But at that point I was just like, okay, we gotta do something, because like if you're out in 6 weeks, you don't have a job, like you don't have housing lined up. And then I ended up calling Ruby, who at the time I did not know very well, but we've become like much closer friends since. And then Jayla, who I've actually been friends with for quite a while, but I didn't even know was in the program. And really, I just like wanted their opinion on like, hey, I think that this is something that like I can do, which is just like set up this. I think, and really what was interesting was like, Ruby, I remember Ruby being initially a little bit hesitant, like Ruby was like, oh, I already have, the Trans Man Fight Club set up, and the Trans Man Fight Club is, and I was just like, okay, I'm so happy that the Trans Man Fight Club is happening, and I continue to be happy that the Trans Man Fight Club is happening. Simultaneously, I just knew that like if we reframed it from like a charity event where it costs $5 to attend into like, this is a crisis, this needs to happen, we would raise a lot more money with that sort of framing than with the Trans Man Fight Club sort of like one-time event. And it was quite successful. We raised $31,000, which has been disseminated at this point. And so each person gets over $3,100. Really, it's through the collaboration, especially with Taya, but as well as with Ruby and Jayla, that like became possible. And simultaneously, concurrently with this, I feel like the fundraiser was actually kind of like an afterthought.
Yeah.
Because my primary thought was like, oh, I'm gonna shoot a documentary about this. And I think like there's something about like the framing of like how we brought this like idea of precarity to people through how we marketed the campaign, that made it so that way people like were willing to open up their wallets for the youth impacted. And I think that like part of that is like Kaleidoscope is a recognizable institution in the city. It's not like, I don't think you reach like a 50% threshold, but like if you are straight and you are progressive and you have interacted with like any sort of like liberal, leftist, or progressive institution, you've likely heard like Kaleidoscope Youth Center be uttered. And so like that's like understanding that like this institution has like part of it is being severed.
Yeah.
And again, we can talk about like why is it being severed. It's complex. But like that's a crisis.
The activists we interviewed were from T, Trans Experimental Action. And once again, conflict of interest disclosure, we are working with them to be hosting a screening for this very documentary.
We are a group of organizers and artists hosting experimental events and actions to further trans liberation. In addition to that, we also have a focus on like mutual aid. And so really it's experimental events and actions that work in favor of mutual aid to improve the quality of life for trans people, particularly trans youth.
What we do mainly is to do like first-hand responses, making sure that like any cases or scenarios we're able to show up and show support, specifically for those that are dealing with homelessness, dealing with emergency responses, that include like lack of access to health care.
I was part of like founding T, and so like I've been doing it since the beginning of T's existence, and it's been really nice. It makes me feel like I have a purpose, and I like being able to help other people.
You know, if people are having lost access to like needles or anything, or any supplies or anything, that's what we can do to be able to complement.
Before all of this happened with Kaleidoscope, like we, my favorite event that I put on this year was this like 9-hour trans variety benefit show called Trans Experimental Aesthetics that basically me and my friend Venus planned it, and it had drag performances, poetry, bands, a lot of hyper pop acts, like experimental noise music, DJs. We had like a semi-formal performance from like a local Kiki ballroom house. That was it was super fun.
So Experimental Action does a lot of work helping people who are unhoused or in other precarious situations. What are some of the challenges that come with that?
I think the challenges are there needing to be a vetting process, because even though you may house somebody who has the very much similar experiences as you and are dealing with those similar experiences, when you are housing somebody, you don't have a clear vetting process or a very much clear understanding of what this person may be capable of, because a lot of it is just us wanting to help and have that trustworthiness instilled already, when it may be somebody who is being impacted with specific mental health issues that may cause them to be unfortunately violent or have violent outbursts, or may put us in situations that we may not be able to handle.
It just seems very much like other community members just step in a way that like you would expect, like say like the state or other nonprofits to step in, but just aren't.
I think that is something that, unfortunately, for a very long time, we've grown very used to. It has always been that way, where the structures that we live under is supposed to be able to have resources that we should be able to access to, but a lot of times they don't, because of the image that is projected onto us, that we are unworthy of help, and that the discrimination, the isolation, the gender dysphoria, all of the things that we go through as trans people and non-binary and in the LGBT community, that it's our fault. There is a reason why T is the last letter in the acronym, because for a long time, specifically when I speak on the intersection of being trans, we have fought a lot longer to be able to put ourselves in the limelight, let alone to be able to let the world know that we matter, our lives matter, our experiences matter. But even then now, we're in a situation where that same precariousness of the fact that because we are so hypersexualized and exoticized and put through a specific lens, that we cannot teach our children to be kind to us, that we cannot teach others that we are human beings too, and that we can be valuable to our economy, to our people, that we are just supposed to be stuck in the underbelly of society, that's where our place is supposed to be, and I think that's absolutely wrong.
The trans community is very small. And because the trans community is very small, like you kind of just like get to know everyone more than you expect to.
So what have the last 2 months been like for you then?
Well, it's a better question to ask what 2025 has been, which is just white knuckle, like nose to the grindstone, buckle down. We need to get everybody locked into our community immediately. What it has looked like is me taking the lucky advantages that I got back in 2024 of like getting into the Thrive program early when I was a kid and getting a lot of letters, a lot of experience with executive management in terms of transitioning, like making the phone calls, making the emails, figuring out how insurance works, figuring out how court documents works, how name changes work, how gender changes work, and sharing that information with as many people as I could. It was basically me reaching out to every trans person I know and being like, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? I will sit with you. I will find a time to meet with you for 3 hours to get that appointment scheduled or get that court document figured out, because you may not do it if I don't push you to. You know what I mean? I don't want to force anybody through a transition by any means, but if someone tells me, oh, I was thinking about getting my passport marker changed, but I just don't feel like it. I have to hold them to the grindstone like, no, this won't be available soon. You need that urgency. And if there's one thing that I have that I contributed to the community in 2025, it's probably urgency. It was looping people into signal chats, looping people into different environments where they could get hormones, where they could get surgeries, and just connecting people as tightly as possible.
Everyone like that I'm friends with have been really supportive and asking like, what can I do to help support you? Or like, I'm here if you need something. They'll do their best to like provide that or find somebody who can. So I've never really had that kind of support before, so it's been really nice and making me feel a little bit more hopeful.
I need to be in kinship with other queer and trans people in order to like sustain like my life force, really.
I see little bits of what people might call infighting in the community sometimes, and I'm quick to stamp those out. Like we saw maybe a couple months back some trans men online and stuff getting insecure about the whole Protect the Dolls thing. But other than those little spats that I see that I call out when I see them, it's a community that is very much invested in keeping everybody else afloat no matter what. I've seen people move heaven and earth. I've seen all of my friends who are already dealing with pretty intense personal issues on top of being transgender, just move the heavens and the earth and hold the world on their shoulders for everybody else in their community. I have never been wanting in a community. I am currently being housed by 2 other genderqueer people. I have had, again, my top surgery was completely catered to by someone who housed me and nursed me, waited on me hand and foot for a full 2 weeks while she was still working a full-time job where she had to be on call. There were so many people in my community that dropped everything for me, notably trans women. A lot of trans women do the heavy lifting. I mean, Penelope, you know, and my other friends, Sai, like, they have been doing the heavy lifting. If anything, 2025 has been a year for me where I realize how much trans women hold up the backbone of my community, and I've been trying to start events and do panels calling in trans men in our community to be like, hey, let's not be the deadbeat dads of our community, let's give back everything that we got. If you ever enter a queer space online, you're gonna see a lot of chronically online people being like, you gotta stop arguing about he, him, lesbians, we're dying out here. Come on, please, please, you know. And I'm glad that in Columbus currently and in my community, I don't see a lot of that at all. That's a big thing that I'm proud of in this community. I mean, I was planning on hosting panels and stuff talking about trans masculinity, how we can be better allies, And as I've connected with a lot of those people in the community, I realized, wow, there really isn't any quote-unquote infighting. There really isn't any kind of that discord here. There's a bit, obviously. There are things that need to be looked at, and our community needs to be critiqued and adjusted, but I'm proud of everybody in Columbus. I'm proud of the way everybody's pulling together.
Networking has happened, but also like deepening ties with like especially Ruby, Jayla, and Taya, like and like I feel like I've become a better leader since this happened. Also, I feel like they've become better leaders, and we're collectively building each other up to like have power and have the power in the way that like we want to see it, in a way that like is happening very organically and not through like formalized trainings, but rather through trial and error.
We come from a system that has failed us on such a personal level. We come from a place where a lot of us are supposed to be felt loved, cared for, and cherished, like our parents had promised us, but we realized very quickly that that promise and the love is conditioned with the fact that we have to be in very much likeliness and sameness with them. When they realize that we are queer and transgender, there is a disconnect. There is a lot of fear, a lot of fear-mongering that goes on, and a lot of miscommunication. We are then put in a place as young children to be dishonest with ourselves and those around us, to feel like we need to fit in a mold, to feel like that is the only way to be respected, to be listened to be valued, and to be loved.
How has general society been treating you throughout this entire experience?
I mean, it depends. Some people are super supportive. Like, we have that fundraiser that we raised quite a bit of money. Like, the community really cares. But also, like, whenever I go out, just like to the library or something, I like don't get treated very well by other populations. So like online, I feel like there's been a lot of support. Well, there's also been a lot of not support online as well. So I don't know. It's just been a mix. Like, there's a lot of support that I'm really grateful for, and there's also a lot of people who just hate that I exist and want me gone. So
How supportive do you feel like is and was Columbus growing up to trans people?
Well, again, I got lucky. I was put in schools. That's your primary social accepting environment when you are young and transitioning. My parents, a little iffy. My dad grew up in Xenos. He immigrated from, Xenos. Dwell now. Can't hide from me. I know that name change. Sorry, I'm dead naming a church. I'm dead naming a church. I'm dead naming a church. But it's for good reason. They only did that to hide. My dad immigrated from Germany when he was around in his late 20s. And Xenos likes to scoop people up who don't have a lot of social connections. So my dad grew up and evolved into an adult very evangelical. But my father is also a German immigrant, so he doesn't like fascism, because he was lectured about it quite often by my grandfather, who was involved in some anti-Nazi World War II efforts. So he's got this tug of like, I want to be evangelical, I feel iffy about gays and trans people, but I know that Nazis like to target trans and gay people.
There being a lot of support for you, and then also being a lot of antagonization, does that make you fearful? Does that make you hopeful?
both.
Both.
I mean, hopeful in the sense that I feel like if something were to happen to me, there would be support for it, but also the fear that something is going to happen to me that I'll need support for. Like, especially if I do end up on the streets again, like, I mean, there's ICE in Columbus right now. I'm Mexican and get a lot of people commenting random things and like hateful things whenever I go out. So like that's a big worry of mine, just like not having somewhere to go home to and then being like, well, and then also just like being visibly queer.
Yeah.
I get a lot of comments and people yelling at me on the streets for that as well. So like it does worry me a lot. But I know that like like I said, if something were to happen, I feel like I'd have good support. But I fear that things will happen, so I don't know.
As an outsider, I had a question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Do you ever get the feeling like it's hard for people to come to an opinion of you? Like they whenever they see you, they just automatically come to their opinion, whether good or bad. You don't have time to make that, like, you know, you don't have you can't present yourself in the way that you want to be presented because they've already just kind of spotted you. And
yeah, and that goes for a lot of things, like for my queerness or for like being a person of color. Even though I think I look very white, people don't think that whenever I go out into the world. And so that's always like an interesting experience for me. And so, yeah, people make a lot of assumptions and just act based on those assumptions, even if it's like not even, because like, for instance, a lot of people assume I'm a trans woman, which isn't true. Well, my gender's a little bit weird. I identify as two-spirit, but like, I'm more trans-masculine legally, technically speaking, but people always assume I'm transitioning the other way, and that's gotten me to a lot of dangerous situations. So I don't know, people just think a lot of things, and it is what it is, I guess.
Where have these dangerous settings been?
Mostly like on the bus or like walking into like different outdoor spaces. Like just like going to a store like Kroger or something.
There's very few opportunities for us within the formal economy, especially for trans people who transition early. Like queer people who come out early just have a lot worse of life outcomes than queer people who come out later in life. Hence, like why you have like Pete Buttigieg and like Pete Hegseth or whatever the fuck his name is, like who are able to like get these positions in like federal government, but like, you know, they went through college and high school and all of their like early career while like still like playing to the heterosexual gaze. And so the position of the trans youth is very precarious. I lean into queer people like being victimized when I'm like appealing to street audiences, and some people have like criticized me for this, but like it works because like this is like these are the outcomes, these are the results of like understanding like no, queer people are oppressed, this is what is happening, and like you know, this T is not an organization that like in its rhetoric centers joy necessarily. Like although joy has like ended up being an outcome of our work.
I was very lucky to grow up in schools where I had a consistent friend group that would constantly gender me correctly. I was surrounded by a bunch of other trans friends, and we weren't really put down as like the weird kids, because everybody was the weird kids. We were at the weird schools, Columbus Gifted Academy, ACPA, Arts and College Preparatory Academy. That is where the artsy-fartsy queer kids went. I had this conversation with my father, and again, he grew up raised by a man who lived through Nazi Germany, who lost his brother fighting the Nazis. So he knows all about like hiding people under floorboards and shit. He was taught that by his father, that this is something you need to do. My father even mustered up the bravery to tell his very stuffy and conservative German parents, hey, you have a grandson. And one of the last things that my grandfather, deep in dementia, told my father was like, you need to go back to the United States and you need to start helping these people immediately, which was a really powerful moment for me. And my dad came back and said, hey, I have a spare room from when you moved out, ironically because of the transphobia. If there is someone who needs a place to stay, I can house them. That's the best thing that I feel like those allies can do, is understand that you're not housing someone who is just a little down on their luck, doesn't know how to manage their money well enough to get a house, that kind of thing. These people are in immediate physical danger. Immediate physical danger. We are living through a historical moment right now, and in 50 years, The younger portions of your community are going to ask you, they're going to point to their history textbooks and be like, wow, did you do anything to help these people? The same way that my father taught me about World War II history. He has a PhD in that. And he'd be like, yeah, this is what my father did. This is what my mother did. This is what we all were doing at the time. You need to understand that history is not some locked glass case from the 80s back, and it just doesn't continue, and we live in this weird present ambiguous time that will never be a historical event. In 50 years, this will be something that is talked about. And you need to ask yourself, can you live with the idea of living through a historical event without helping these people? Best thing you can do is help them immediately with your time, with your finances, with the things that really matter. Finances, housing. It's not just a matter of making a post online or, being nice to your queer friends. They are in trouble. They are being killed, whether passively or actively. Actually, no passive murder, actually. It's all active murder by the state. Not gonna give anybody any slack for that. The best thing you can do is just let them sleep on your couch. Feed them, make them a meal. Buy them dinner, like these small little things. Even me as a trans man in my community, when I go out grocery shopping with my trans woman friends, I pay for their razors and feminine products because I'm like, that's the man tax, unfortunately. Like, you're not gonna pay $18 for that. Find tiny little ways that you can contribute to that community. And I can assure you the community will be grateful. Like, anytime I pour my resources into helping my community, it's almost like a battle, like a game of cards where they're looking for a way to get me back for it. You know what I mean? The gratitude is incredibly resilient and strong, and that's, I feel, how we insulate these communities, is by doing acts of kindness and real emergent efforts without expecting anything in return. And I promise you, it will come back in return.
I can start off by naming statistics and thinking about of course, LGBT and trans youth are just far more likely to be homeless than their cis straight peers. It's doubly true for Black and Indigenous LGBT and trans youth. And that's and we know that the primary cause of trans youth homelessness is family abandonment. And really it's the question becomes kind of why do families abandon trans youth? And that sort of violence is so kind of normalized that it's almost it's difficult to even get to the fundamental why. And so this is why thinking about what is the role of trans misogyny and trans misogynoir in constructing patriarchy, but also these broader social systems that exist that make it so that way people are able to live and function in normal quote unquote lives, while there's this constant subaltern class. And it's truly for the position of man and its privileges to exist, there has to be an excising of the those who should be in the position of men but who are transgressing. And so there's this process of transfeminization that exists specifically to make it so that way those who transgress out of the boundaries of masculinity towards femininity are destroyed, so that way masculinity can maintain its stability and its way of defining itself, which is against first and foremost cis women, not first and foremost, but cis women historically. These norms through a series of historical accidents exist that make it so that way the heterosexual nuclear family is the only acceptable way for kinship to exist for children. And so that if there is the rejection of that through, transness or homosexuality, then the entire structure breaks and kinship no longer exists. And it's really it's the extreme limitedness of heterosexuality that makes it so that way trans people have to be oppressed. Trans people have to be like in a spot where they become homeless, where they aren't able to exist in the formal economy. And this is not just something that exists at an interpersonal level. This is reified by the state system, by who is given automatic rights to parentage. This is reified by religious institutions and cultural institutions. It's heterosexuality all the way down. And truly, like, it's astonishing, you know, like how we just allow this system that like makes it so that way men control everything and women have nothing, and then those who transgress out of masculinity and out of femininity are in a constant state of fugitivity. You know, of course there's going to be a crisis of trans youth homelessness. The crisis is heterosexuality itself.
One of the things that like surprised me when I like, you know, as I progress into adulthood further and further, was like the extent to which you still need your parents once you turn 18.
Yeah. Teenagers just simply have less agency in 2025 than they did in the 90s, the 80s, the 70s.
Yeah.
And so like we are learning, like, young adults are deprived of the skills that they need to be independent. And part of that is, I would say, like, an intentional decision that is being made by adults with specific, like, desires who want to fulfill their, like, libidinal attachment to their children. To maintain that power for longer and longer. And that's... People will point to that as if it's a good thing, you know? And it's truly not. Like, I see very little evidence that this, like, culture of coddling that we have is making lives better for youth and young adults at all. It's making it so that way we're not able to, like, be independent when we need to be independent because we're responding to the crisis of heterosexuality. Yes.
What kind of doors would stable housing open for you?
I would be able to work through a lot of my trauma stuff and like just get to a more stable place mentally. But I have to focus so much on like the present right now and like getting through each day. And I... like, a lot of my trauma affects me now in the present, but, like, I can't really think about that yet, if that makes sense. Like, so, like, dealing with, like, flashbacks and things like that, like, I just kind of have to, like, push it away, which isn't really healthy, but, like, I don't have the time for that. I have to be thinking about where I'm gonna end up.
I asked everyone how others could help LGBTQ youth who are experiencing housing precarity. Here's what they have to say.
I would say probably ask the individual because, like, it varies for all of us. Like, some of us have, like, the funds to, like, do, like, have housing. Like, we just, like, can't find a space. So, like, maybe helping them, like, locate, like, oh, this place might work out for you. Or, like, maybe they don't have the funds. Maybe they could use a bus pass. Or maybe they could just use a snack. Or maybe they just need to talk about it for a second. So, like, I think it really depends on the individual. So just talking to us, like, you would talk to anybody else and, like, hey, how can I support you best right now?
It has become clear to me that we need to grassroots organize and we need to mobilize within our communities as best as we can to make ourselves as self-sufficient, not as an individual, but as a community as we can be. What this looks like to me is creating networks of potentially couch surfing or communal housing amongst ourselves outside of bigger websites, bigger organizations, get to know your neighbors, I feel like, is the best thing you can possibly do. Strangers are your friends in the community, unfortunately. These big corporations, obviously landlords are not your friend. The best thing you can do is find other trans people in your community and be like, okay, who doesn't have a house and who does? Can we link those people up, create safe boundaries and efficient channels for people to communicate their need for housing, get some screening forms set up so that people can set up a housing, sort of a jury-rigged housing unit of their own. That's basically what's happening with my housing. Is one of my genderqueer friends has a more affluent job. They make like $146,000 a year, which is insane compared to other people's salaries. And they were like, you are in a housing unit that's going under, I can house you. Sort of looking at your finances, looking at your housing, and going to the other people in your community and saying, okay, who has something to give and who needs that something? Distributing it effectively. Getting linked up with your community is probably the best thing that you can do, because right now, legislation isn't going to save people's lives. It's just not. It moves too slowly. In this weather, if someone's out on the street for 3 weeks, they could be dead from exposure. That's just how it is. Legislation is not going to help.
It's honestly a lot easier than expected, and I think it's just about connecting. Connecting with those like yourself. You know, trying to build the group, the like community. You know, it's already hard enough trying to find it, but I feel like where we're at now and the access to the internet, it may not be as hard, even though they're trying very hard to make it harder for that to happen. We still have time to be able to find one another and be able to be in communion with one another and be able to build a willpower to be able to help each other through the most hardest situations that we all know we can relate to each other on.
I want people to become scholars of this, like, because like once you really are at a point where you are understanding like how these structures function, it makes it so that you're able to like pick apart the things that you don't expect in greater detail. And so I just you know, I think that if you care about these issues, and it doesn't have to be like trans rights, although like I'd like it if people do like have a serious access of trans feminism, no matter whether or not they're trans women, that they return to when they're thinking about political decision making. You should be engaged deeply in the study and in the knowledge that is being built by the community that is surrounding you.
If somebody's watching this and they want to support an LGBT person who is young and who is in a precarious housing situation, how can they do so?
We always welcome support for ourselves. And if you want specifically your support to KYC to go to the housing program, you can specifically write that in a note if you're donating online, or if you're donating in person with like a check, and you can let us know. We will honor that. We do put that towards the housing program, and that's something we report on at the end of the year, is how much of those funds were designated for housing and where they went. There are a range of other great organizations in Ohio, like Trans Ohio. They are doing amazing work. I actually believe they received a pretty significant grant last year to do some housing, although I don't know all of the details. They are really great folks, and they're a statewide org. And I think a lot of what they do is connect trans and non-binary folks to resources that, again, already exist in the community, that may not be like super obvious or easy to find. Because a lot of the social services out there, you can't just find them with a quick Google, honestly. They're kind of meant to be hidden from people and routed through like care coordinators. So there's a little bit of difficulty with accessing those. That's something that we do, and Trans Ohio does as well. There's also orgs like that do a lot of advocacy, like Equality Ohio. We work on advocacy as well, but that is their entire mission, is to advocate for queer folks in Ohio. So if you're looking to support locally, those are some great options. There's also national options as well. The Trevor Project has always been an amazing one. I remember when I was in college, I remember just like being so happy that something like the Trevor Project existed. The Trans Lifeline is a newer one that has been around for a few years. They're supporting queer and trans youth around the country in a lot of different ways. So, you know, there's a lot of really great orgs out there right now that could use support.
If I could speak to any trans people that are experiencing housing insecurity right now, there are going to be people in your community that are willing to house you. There are going to be people in your community that are willing to split rent with you, split anything with you. There are going to be people that are willing to redistribute resources. I mean, I got my chunk of fundraising money from KYC, the fundraiser. It was like maybe over $3,000 for each person. And I sent half of that to the person who actually housed me for my top surgery because she was struggling with rent and bills for the past couple months. And I was like, boom. Because I already have $10,000 in savings. I was like, I don't need this as much. Someone else does, though, immediately, urgently. There are going to be people that will immediately take up arms for you. They will find a couch for you. They will find a space for you. Set your differences aside as best as you can. You're allowed to have your own boundaries. But the most important thing that we can do, especially with these colder climates, is keep everybody indoors and safe and accounted for and fed. And warm.
I think that with the help of me being on the commission, not only will, you know, these young LGBT youth won't have to feel like they need to rely on one another or feel like they need to rely on people who they only are valued when they're not who they are fully, but instead be able to have spaces where they can truly be themselves and be able to find resources to fully grow into themselves fully and authentically. That was the one thing that helped me become me, was when I first stepped my foot into KYC, I felt so welcomed. I felt so cared about. I felt like I mattered. I felt like my life could have meaning, could have a purpose. And I want that same thing to be instilled in every child and every adult who come into themselves feeling like that it's not possible when it is possible. It is possible to be who you are fully and authentically. I want this interview to showcase that, you know, for the next Jayla that feels trapped, that feels like they have nowhere to go, that feels like they can't rely on anybody else, that it may feel impossible to be who you are, that it's not, that you have hope, that you can have faith in yourself, even when no one else has it for you, that you can become strong, you can develop the willpower to be able to get through a lot of things, a lot of barriers.
A lot of things I've been seeing and hearing is like kind of blaming like the people in the program, like not for like ending or anything, but like just saying like it's unnecessary, like we should just have our lives together basically, or like different things, like maybe we should just go home, or like we should just, you know, just telling us what we should have done. And I would just encourage people to think about like other situations. Like if I could go home, I definitely would. That's just not an option for me. And even if I did go home, like it was not safe at all. Like I would honestly probably be safer on the streets than with my family. And like not everyone has that luxury. Even, I don't know, so just like, I guess people watching this probably won't really think those things, but that's something I've seen a lot on like comments of like Facebook posts and stuff of people like, oh, the parents, blah, blah, blah. What parents? I don't know.
Thank you for watching all the way to the end. This was one of our most ambitious projects to date, if not our most ambitious project to date. And I hope that we can continue raising the bar higher and higher going forward. You can follow us on Instagram, follow us on TikTok, and subscribe to us on YouTube, and also check out our website. So thanks for coming along.